Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. Now, this is a pre recorded session this week as I am traveling, but if you do have any questions, if you're joining on Zoom, you can always reply to the confirmation email that you got when you registered for the class. They'll forward those to me and I'll be able to answer those. If you're watching on YouTube, just leave a comment under the video and I'll get to those. And then, same thing with Facebook, you can leave a comment on the video and I'll get to them as well as I can. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's national diagnostic technical trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep with Snap-on. So I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they service in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before that, it was 8 years at Subaru. So over time, worked in a Subaru shop, and over time, I guess, just became that default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up with the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my pay. And before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is our OEM specific training series that we started a couple weeks ago with Ford. This week we are talking about Toyota. And speaking of my underhood experience and my dealership experience, right? So as you work on the same type of car all the time, you learn the little idiosyncrasies about the cars. So usually, if you find this problem, this is the fix for it, right? This is not always exactly what's in the flow chart, right? So you don't always work on the same car, and if you do, then you understand that. If you work on anything that comes in the door, maybe you might have a good little tip or trick for that. But if you don't work on Toyotas, and maybe one day it rolls through the door, some of this information could be very helpful as well. And like I said a couple weeks ago, we're going to expand this throughout the year, pretty much like an every other week thing. We're just going to go through different brands throughout the year, so we will get to pretty much all of them at this point. We're doing it by ranked by North American sales. So we're doing a domestic, and Asian, and a European. So last week was 2 weeks ago was Ford. This week's Toyota, and then in a couple weeks it'll be BMW, and then we'll cycle through again on the next cycle. So the point is to try and get you familiarized with as many of the weird idiosyncrasies of different manufacturers that you may not be aware of. So first off, let's talk some history. Let's talk about the history of Toyota. So it was established in September 1933 by Kiichiro Toyoda. That is not a misprint. That is how he spelled his name. So Toyoda. And it was then incorporated in 1937. Now, the next line tells us why. So it was changed to Toyota shortly thereafter for good luck. So the story goes, 8 in the Japanese culture is a lucky number. And to write out Toyota, DA, in Japanese lettering, it was like probably 10 or 12, I think it was. So it was more strokes than if you write out Toyota with a T. So it's 8 strokes to write out Toyota in Japanese lettering. So that was considered good luck, and that's why they changed the spelling from Toyota with a D to Toyota with a T. Interesting little tidbit. They began mainly by building trucks for the miscellaneous Japanese customers, and then of course during the war in World War II, they built trucks for the Japanese military, and then post World War II, they began building passenger cars. The Toyopet Crown was Toyota's first fully designed and built automobile. So prior to that, they had taken maybe other folks' designs, and a lot of them they said were maybe car bodies on top of truck frames, that sort of thing. So this was their first ground up designed and built automobile, and it went on sale in August of 1955. So since then, Toyota has become the largest auto manufacturer in the world. They build over 10 million vehicles every year. Of course, they're built all over the world. There's numerous factories, even here in the United States, Japan, of course, and elsewhere. And they manufacture, like I said, over 10 million vehicles a year. So really has grown from the humble beginnings up to that. There's also a few other things that they're very well known for that have spread throughout the industry and other industries. Um, They're famous for what they call the Toyota way. So it's their corporate policies, which include continuous improvement and respect for people. Now, at Snap-on, I know, because I do more than just this for training. I also train new employees when they come in as well, and we talk about that. How we adopted some of those principles as well, like rapid continuous improvement is one of ours, and also the Toyota production system, which is lean production and just-in-time production. So those are other principles that we also use over here at Snap-on in any of our facilities, with in regards to keeping it efficient and continually improving processes as we go. Right. So it's spread out through the entire industry, and as I said, other industries as well, like the tool manufacturing industry. So with that, that's a little history lesson. So now let's talk about the top models as far as Toyota goes. So this is based on, like I said, North American sales from 2013 to 2023, so 10 years of sales. Overall, number one sold Toyota is going to be a RAV4. And this is any iteration of them. So a RAV4 is number one, Camry's number two, Corolla is number three, and so on. Get down to the Avalon at about 390,000. So it doesn't appear the Avalon's terribly popular compared to the others. But over that 10 years, 20 million vehicles sold, and that's I don't know, like an average about 2 million a year. So that's pretty good, pretty solid. So I took a few representative vehicles out of that, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into them when we go live on the tool. First one is a 2019 RAV4. So 2019 was kind of the high watermark in sales for the RAV4. This 2019 model was the fifth generation of the RAV4. In the North America anyways, two different engines. You got a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated gasoline engine and a 2.5 liter hybrid engine, which are probably fairly similar, I would imagine, knowing Toyota. And an 8-speed automatic transmission on the naturally aspirated engine, and then the hybrid, of course, has that eCVT that they work with. Another good example was the 2015 Camry. Once again, that was the high watermark for 2015. Was the one of the high watermarks for sales. It was a fifth generation wide body style. So they have a wide body style and a narrow body style in the world. So this is the fifth generation of the wide body style. And in 2015 model year, that ended up being a mid-generation refresh, as manufacturers tend to do. They'll change, headlights and front clips and things like that. Well, we're not really changing much else about the car, but a good refresh to the way it looks. Was offered with a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine, just like in that RAV4, 2.5 liter hybrid like the RAV4, and this one also has the 6-cylinder 3.5 liter that they use in an awful lot of things. And you'll see that as kind of a running theme throughout. A lot of manufacturers do it. Toyota really does with the lean and all that. They have a few main engines that they use in most of the line. And 6-speed automatic transmission in the non-hybrid and the eCVT in the hybrid. In 2015 and 2016, interesting little tidbit here, it was the most American-made car, with 75% of its parts originating from the United States. So a Japanese manufacturer, 75% of the parts are the most American-made car in those model years, even over Ford, Chevy, and the like. So I mean, they obviously they do have factories here. Toyota does. I know they build Camrys right next to Subarus in Indiana. So yeah, most American-made car for those 2 years. I thought that was an interesting little trivia question or answer. And then another representative, this wasn't highest on the list. It was almost 1 million Priuses sold in that last 10-year span. Not quite, pretty close, but we do know that Toyota is very big on the hybrid vehicles. They were one of the early adopters of hybrid technology, and they've just expanded it and worked on perfecting it over the years. The earlier ones, didn't have as much range and all that. Now the newer ones are quite sophisticated out there. So 2013 Prius, about 10 years ago, there's the beginning of that run, but it was one of the higher watermarks of sales. And I think that's probably because as they went on, as they got the dialed in on the Prius, they started selling other versions of their vehicles as hybrids. So you had a RAV4 hybrid, Camry hybrid, Corolla hybrid, what have you. So it gave folks more options. So then they didn't have to buy a Prius if that was because that wasn't the only hybrid option. If they wanted a hybrid vehicle, they could buy really any Toyota and it had a hybrid option. So this 2013 Prius model was the third generation of Prius. The 1.5 liter hybrid and a 1.8 liter hybrid available, and eCVT transmission, as they all have. And that was the highest North American sales volume year, as I said, in 2013. Like I said, probably petering off because other models had hybrid options as well. Some common issues across the board when it comes to Toyota vehicles. Now, they are pretty reliable. So a lot of the issues were, I don't know, not all that odd, strange, out of the ordinary. Pretty much if you keep up with maintenance, they should be pretty well not that failure prone. Many EVAP issues, though, which I think is fairly normal for most manufacturers to have EVAP issues, just because there's so many moving parts in the EVAP system and so many different failure points you could have. So yeah, you'll see when we go live on the cars and look at the codes, you can see how many EVAP issues there were. Certain generations of hybrids had high voltage battery issues, especially the older ones. As they went on in years, they changed the battery technology as they went, the battery chemistry, and so on. So the earlier ones, you'd probably see more issues than the newer ones. Misfires are very common on the V6 engine, that 3.5 liter, and the 4 liter. I've seen quite a few misfires come up on those coil problems, things like that. And if you've watched the news at all in the last 10, 20 years, some major recalls have happened on Toyotas as well. And customer satisfaction campaigns, such as the frame replacement on the pickup trucks. They take the whole body off and swap the frame out. I talked to technicians who were doing that right in the thick of it, and they were like, yeah, it's once you learn how to do it, it was great money because they were all flat rate, and it was like something like 100 hours or something like that to change a frame. So they'd team up and could do 1 or 2 a day. And then the accelerator pedals, of course, right? The random acceleration, which might not necessarily have always been the pedal. It could have also been, I know the carpets as well. They would pin them down. I have some clips for the carpets to clip them down so they wouldn't slide up underneath the pedal as well. So that was another cause of that. But that, obviously made worldwide news for that. Now let's look at some common codes that we'd find. And this was, at first blush, this was really interesting that 8 out of the top 10 codes for Toyota were the same. So it's P1604, which is almost all of these. And it's across the board on any of the different engines, right? We can see that. This is ranked out of our top 3,000 some odd codes that show up in the tool. But they're all startability malfunctions. So the definition of what that is the vehicle didn't start. Maybe it took too long to start, maybe it started installed, or maybe it just didn't start the first time you cranked it and then you had to crank it again. I thought that was kind of odd that it showed up that much. So I was actually talking to former Toyota, one of our diagnostic reps who was a former Toyota tech. And he's like, oh yeah, that's a Me Too code, he called it. So usually that code shows up on just about any engine code that you get. We'll also have this with it. Because I guess the startability would change if we have a code in there. So that is a check it last type of code. Check the other ones first. Check any of the other drivability codes first before you even bother to delve into that one, because that's just going to show up automatically, so to say. So I said, all right, so let me redo the list then and take a top 10 based off of taking that one out. So I took that one out, and now we see actually, it's kind of funny that one engine seemed to bubble to the top 2, the 1.8 liter in the Corolla. But a lot of lean codes, right? System 2 lean, bank 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So half of the top 10 codes were that mobilizer, accumulator leak, and the anti-lock brakes, oxygen sensor, and AF sensor as well. So fairly common codes. I mean, lean codes are pretty common. Rich codes can be common as well. So that doesn't terribly surprise me. It is interesting how it's pretty much stuck to one engine, but you'll see that across the board too. You get a commonality of an engine. You'll get used across different models, different model years. You'll see that. So, Some OEM specific features, and one really sticks out in my mind, and it's the D4S engine. So this has been, they've been using this for quite some time now. And what it is it is kind of a dual purpose engine. So it has a direct injection. When they went to direct injection, and if you know anything about direct injection, it directly injects the fuel into the combustion chamber. One drawback of that on most vehicles, anyways, is that you will get carbon buildup on the back of the valves because we no longer had the fuel spray washing off the back of the valves before it got in there. So Toyota does something a little different. They use double injectors. So we have one injector is the high pressure injector for direct injection, and then we have a regular lower pressure injector for port injection on the top. Now, this isn't just there just to clean the valves. Don't mistake that. This is used to drive the vehicle down the road. They can actually mix how much one or the other is being used to help with the control the fuel mixture and so on. So you just got to keep that in mind on some of these engines. I know like the 2.5 liter in the teens Camrys up till now has this style of engine in it. So if I have a drivability problem and I'm looking at the fuel system, is it the high pressure injector? Is it the low pressure injector? Because there's two injectors per cylinder, and I would have to be aware of that and check those at the same time. Now we'll go to a segment I call tips from a tech. So these are the kind of things that I've been looking for these different brands, talking to actual techs who've worked on these cars for many years, and it's the when you see this is what the problem is, and it's like the off the wall thing that you might not necessarily think of. That's the type of stuff, because I can think of, when we get to Subaru, it'll just be tons of them because I can think of probably half a dozen just off the top of my head. But I was out in Denver this weekend, and I was talking to our diagnostic rep out there, Elliot. And Elliot is a former Toyota tech. He's only a couple years removed. And then he was also getting some feedback from one of his buddies who's still there. And these are a couple different things that showed up that kind of you might not necessarily notice at first blush until you've actually seen it multiple times on the same vehicle. So first one, roughly 09 to 14 Corolla. I'm sure there's probably a little bit of room on either side of that year range in order to get us where we're talking about. But if I have one of these cars that got in a front end collision, and then after repair comes back from the body shop, and then all of a sudden customer complains that the dash is going nuts, the lights are flashing, the needles are going all over the place. It's not doing the normal stuff that it's supposed to be doing as an instrument cluster. So the thing's going nuts, going crazy. And what they ended up finding, and this is not just once, and this is multiple times on multiple vehicles. Maybe it was kind of one body shop. I'm not really sure on that one, but on those cars, if they get hit in the front, there are 4 grounds. It's 2 on this side, 2 on that side, and they're kind of on the unibody bumper area. So you imagine the vehicle gets hit, the vehicle gets repaired, and they spray it. They spray it with paint, and then they put the wiring harness back together after they spray the paint. So now it's not making a good contact to ground, and it's messing up all sorts of things electrically in the vehicle. And like you said, you would notice it in the cluster, apparently, in this case. So easy enough to fix on both of them. Clean off the paint, bolt them back up to nice solid metal, and then you don't have to worry about it. But that was seen multiple times. So I know it wasn't just a one-off freak accident in that case. So if you ever get that happen, might be a good place to start checking. Next one was the 2nd gen Tacomas. Those have problems with fuel pump relays. And it's not necessarily the relay. It's a lot that it has to do with the connector in the engine room box, because it's got fuse and relay box in the engine. Corrosion. Also, there's could be some other connectors along the way that would also have corrosion, especially back down there. I also saw a couple other stories as I kind of researched this. The fuel pump resistor and melted connector on the relay as well. So melted or corrosion, or maybe a combination of both. I'm not really sure. But you will find corrosion on that. It'll cause the fuel pump relay to act intermittently, which would cause a loss in fuel pressure, which would cause a drivability issue. It might not just shut off that pump and not start it again. It might be an intermittent start the pump, stop the pump, start the pump, start the pump. So something to look for in those cases as well. And that's once again, second gen Tacomas. Here's another one. And this one was so common, I guess, that it had to be Toyota put it out on a bulletin. So this is 2014 to 2020 4Runners. And when people put aftermarket LED headlights like these in there, you can see how they got a little fan on there too to keep them cool. So these aftermarket LED headlight bulbs will cause interference in the electrical system, and they actually was so much that they actually came out with a bulletin on this, a tech tip. So it'll cause issues in the ABS system. So ABS light on, CO 226, 236, 46, 56, and it's in the brake system. Some 2014 to 2020 model year 4Runner vehicles may have experienced ABS light on with codes. It may not have codes either. May or may not have codes. First, inspect the ABS connector for signs of damage. If that's fine, then they say break out a scope and check the ground side with the lights on and with the lights off, and check it for noise. If you get a lot of noise with the headlights on, next step, remove the aftermarket bulbs and put in factory bulbs and see if it goes away. If it goes away, then you know that was the problem, causing interference there. It should look more like this and a lot less like this, because that's a lot of noise right there. A lot of noise going on. So you would check it with a scope to see if there was noise, and if it was, then it's probably the LED headlight bulbs that are doing that. And then this one was told to me that it was on an Avalon, and maybe that's just the first place that they found it, but this is actually, I was able to find this on all models, all Toyota models. And this was just strange because I'd never seen it before on any other manufacturer. Maybe it is a thing. I haven't really bothered to look that deep into it, but I thought it was pretty unique for this. So this is for a misfire. Any misfire, 300 through 308 code, right? It tells you what to check. Check your normal stuff. This is right from Toyota, the inspection procedure on how to walk through this and what to look at. And then at the very bottom, it says an extremely imbalanced drive wheel, which causes body vibration, may cause misfire DTC detection. So if I have no other drivability problems, but I have maybe a misfire code, and I've checked other things and nothing seems to be wrong, we need to road test this. Probably should have road tested it first anyways. But if you got a severe vibration in the wheel, enough to vibrate the drivetrain, it'll vibrate the engine, vibrate the drivetrain, and then it will cause the crank sensor to think the vehicle's misfiring, even though it's not. It's just enough vibration to vibrate that sensor and make it throw a weird signal to the computer, and the computer's like, oh, it must be misfiring, and then it throws a code. So I thought that was really unique, interesting, and it showed up. I looked it up, it was on the Avalon first, and then I found it on a RAV4, found it on a Camry. So it seems like it's fairly common across the board on Toyotas anyways. Don't know about other manufacturers, like I said. Now, how about scan tool stuff? OEM specific functions on the scan tool. So, as I said, fairly reliable vehicles, not a lot of major problems with them. So there's not necessarily a lot of unique tests. Now, Snap-on does work directly with Toyota on their factory tool. So pretty safe to say we have pretty darn close coverage to factory. But a couple unique things that we'll find in there are multiple freeze frame. I think a couple of other manufacturers have gone that route by now, but the first time I saw it ever was on Toyota. So multiple freeze frame, you get the code, you hit the little film strip, and then it gives you snapshots. It gives you one at the time the code's set, one a little bit after, one a little bit before, one a little bit before that, one a little bit before that. So it goes back 3, and then it goes forward 1, and then 1 at the time of the code. So I can see what happened leading up to the code, and then how it is affected after the code as well. Also, an automated evap test in there. So on these vehicles, and it's a Toyota thing as far as I'm aware. Subaru uses the same system, so the Subaru does it the same way. But to run the evap monitor, it has to cold soak for 5 hours. So if I want to check my evap system after I did a repair to verify that everything was okay, I would have to wait 5 hours for it to do this automatic test where it uses a vacuum pump and it pulls it down. Or I can just go in and use the automated evap test. It'll automatically do it for me, and then I can watch the screen and I can see the pressures go up and down as it goes through the different steps. So it's a real time saver, so I don't have to wait for 5 hours. So there's just an example of what the multiple freeze frame will look like. Just freeze frame there. Transmission related tests, we have automatic transmission code registration, read and write. So what this does is if I do any transmission work like a transmission or a TCM, what I need to do is I need to copy the configuration data out of the transmission control module and then put it into the new one. So depending on what was replaced and what work was done, it needs a code off the transmission to kind of match it together. So it's going to save it to the scanner and then writes it back in the TCM memory. All right, let's go live. We're going to look at a couple things on the tool. Then we're going to look at some real world data points, so to say, with some SureTrack info. See how that works. So first thing I want to go through is the Camry. And if we go into scanner, let's see what we got. Okay, so say I wanted to go into engine, for example. You can see we got a lot of options in engine. More than just codes, data, and functional tests. We do have the freeze frame here. So the freeze frame is built in to the engine module. A couple other modules as well, but mainly the engine module. Functional tests, those are going to be your bidirectional controls, your on-offs, right? Fuel cuts, VVTs, etc. Evap. Check mode. This is what this is going to do. Is going to take 2 trip DTCs and make them set in 1 trip. So it tightens the detection, so they'll set easier. So if I'm having trouble duplicating a code for a customer, I can then set it into this check mode, and it'll bring me into that type of mode. Next one, system tests. So there's that automatic evap system check again, where it bypasses that 5-hour cold soak. You can also do it manually and step through each section as it goes. I prefer automatic myself. VIN read and write. And generic functions, that just brings you over to the generic OBD2 side of the computer, and then troubleshooter there as well. So we can see a couple things there. By going to transmission, we have the AT code registration read and write, like I talked about before. It's used to input a compensation code and initialize the ECU after an AT assembly or ECU has been installed. You're going to read the code, retrieve the saved code, and enter the code. So we can read it and it'll store it. Retrieve the code from the scanner and write it into the module. And then manually enter the code as well. So we got to make sure the vehicle is stopped in park and all that. Files will be saved with a title that includes the date and time, so make sure the date and time on your scan tool are correct. And then if I wanted to read it, retrieve it from the scanner, and then manually enter it, I can do all. So basically copy and paste. All right, let's go into here and look at some real world data. So the 2015 Camry with the standard 4-cylinder non-hybrid vehicle, we have 430,138 repair instances at our disposal out of our 2.65 billion repair orders that we have. And that is specific to the engine, your make model engine. So 430,000 repairs. Now, if I were to look at this, we can just see, what are the most common occurrences. So it's a 8-year-old, 9-year-old car now. So pads and rotors, of course, battery, sure, valve stem, spark plugs, sure, why not? Calipers, tire pressure. If I go over here, we can see evap. And then we got lean. Oh, and there's that 1604. There's that startability thing, and then 1605 is its brother, so they can both show up. Throttle pedal position sensor, brake switch, catalyst efficiency. So tons of evap codes showing up there. Noise is heard, engine doesn't start, brakes vibrate, etc. Those are all fairly common, I think. And then another evap code over there as well. And then a lot of transmission fluid, transmission oil, that sort of thing over there. So that's on the 2.5. Let's go to the 3.5. And you will notice Remember how I said those 6 cylinders? So 267,458 repair instances on that one. And if we take a look at this, remember how I said on the 6 cylinders had misfire issues? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of the top 10 codes for this engine are something to do with a misfire or ignition coil. Ignition coil, random misfire. Then we have oxygen sensor heater down here and so on. It also gives us number 6 commonly replaced part is a coil, and number 7 is a spark plug. So that tends to make sense. Axle shaft, that seems pretty high up on the list too. Engine runs rough, noise heard, engine doesn't start. That's all pretty similar. And then these are just stuff that's been punched in there, so that's going to match the same. And one more engine, we're going to go to the hybrid. And see what we go on the hybrid. So on the hybrid, we get down to evap problems again. So evap. Couple misfires, lean, coolant thermostat. Here's a replaced hybrid battery pack. So as we said, we did have some problems with batteries then. And then if we look over here, wheels and tires and so on, spark plugs, batteries, the common stuff. So there's your Camry. Now let's look up the RAV4, which is going to have pretty much the same scanner stuff because pretty much the same engine. So on this case, 2019, 19,762 repair instances because it's a lot newer of a vehicle. Just starting to show up in aftermarket shops. And interesting enough, it's engine coolant bypass valve, evap, misfire, thermostat, intake valve control, evap again, mass airflow. So not a ton of instances down here, but engine coolant bypass valve, that seems pretty high. So I think that might be an issue with that. AC refrigerant, that seems kind of high on the list, but not nearly as many as wheels and disc brakes. Noise heard, vehicle pulls, etc. Alignments, fuel pumps, cabin air filters, right? That's the normal stuff over there. So a lot of evap stuff. Let's change to the hybrid. I think it's this one. Yes. Okay. So there we go. Evap, oxygen sensor, system lean, etc. So still kind of following along those lines. Like I said, they're pretty reliable as a manufacturer. So it's not, I didn't suspect you would find a lot of weird stuff. That's why I was glad I got a couple of those real world stories from the guys to see. And last one's the Prius. And we can see number 1 on this 2013 Prius, replace hybrid batteries, the number 1 code on that vehicle. 317 times out of 42,000 repaired. Over here, wheels, tires, brake rotors, spark plugs, tire pressure sensors, AC refrigerant. What's this C1467? That is a speed sensor code. Speed sensor code. So that's number 10. And then P3190, that is fuel pump, looks like. Poor engine power. Engine does not start, fuel run. So poor engine power in that case. So drivability issue. So we can see, other than that, evap stuff. Lots of evap stuff. And then their engine failed to start again. That's related to the old 1604 code. So we can see a lot of differences and a lot of similarities, just depending on what model you're working on and what you're seeing in the shop there. As I said, fairly reliable. Looks like we got a couple common failures with evap and misfires on the 6 cylinders for sure. But by and large, I think fairly simple to work on and diagnose. But there's always, every manufacturer's got those little weird things, right? So hopefully you picked up a couple nuggets on Toyota today. And that's my time for Toyota. Let's talk about next week. Next week, we are switching gears to functional tests, special functions, and output controls. What is the difference? So this is another one that kind of comes from our customer care department. And they tend to get a lot of phone calls on confusion with functional tests, special functions. What all is what? And then how do I do some of these things? So we'll try and dive into it as best we can in the time allotted to kind of tell you the differences between them, show you some really good examples of what you might see bidirectional controls versus special tests and so on and so forth. So hopefully you'll join me same time, same place every Tuesday, 6 and 9 Eastern. Snapon.com/OT if you want to join on Zoom. Otherwise, the 6 p.m. Eastern class goes to YouTube. That's youtube.com/Snapon Diagnostics. Or the 9 p.m. Eastern class, like we're doing right now, goes live to my Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/Snapon Jason, all one word. You want to see any of the other episodes in this series, anywhere from ADOS to reflashing and everything in between. We have 83 different episodes for your perusal. They're free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available once again, youtube.com/Snapon Diagnostics. There is a playlist for online training. And then also, if you scan that QR code, it'll bring you right to the page and subscribe you automatically. So super simple. You can just scan that with your phone and it'll bring you right to where you need to be. So that's a beautiful thing. Now, as far as questions, like I said, this is a pre-recorded session this week as I am traveling. But if you do have a question on Zoom, you can email it to the confirmation email. Just reply to that. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment. I'll get to those. Or on Facebook, same thing. Just leave a comment under the video and I'll get to those. And I do also want to mention my buddy Keith, who also does free training. He does it on specific scan tools. So on Wednesdays, somebody is Zeus Plus. And then on Thursday, it is Apollo and Triton tools. So it's one class per day. So it's 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific. Snapon.com/OT. That is Zoom only. It's kind of, it's meant to be. I have my tool sitting in front of me. Keith's going to put his tool up on the screen, and we're going to be able to follow along with all the button presses and walk through and get that muscle memory training. That helps a lot of people with the hands-on actual training, virtual hands-on training. It works very well. Keith's been with us for over 30 years. He has a deep well of Snap-on diagnostic knowledge, so definitely worth your time. The first hour or so he spends on scanner functions, Wi-Fi, make sure that's set up, talk about secure gateways, talk about Snap-on Cloud, goes through code to completion using Fast Track Intelligent Diagnostics as well. Got to show you the ins and outs of that. Then he takes about a 5-minute break after that, and then he goes through the scope and meter functions on the respective tools as well. So like I said, very thorough class, about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, depending. And, definitely walk through that if you want to learn more about your tool or you're interested in one of those tools. And with that, I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day, spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you'll join me next week for our OEM specific BMW training. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a nice night and take care.